Poetry today is one of the many subtopics in literature. What you guys do in poetry? What are one of the things you guys do in poetry? You do dramas, you do novels, and then this is the third one, which is poetry. So when we're looking at poetry, we're going to look at the foundations first. That's the first thing I'm going to introduce you guys to. You guys know what poems are. Right, you guys read poems, seen it throughout your lives growing up, but now we're really going to dive into what is poetry. And after we go over the foundations, we'll do the analysis, and then tomorrow, I don't know if you saw starting, the anatomy and mechanics of poetry. So those will be things like the stanzas, what are sonnets, and all that kind of stuff, right? And the rhyming schemes. We are going to touch on it, but tomorrow it will be a deeper dive on what they are actually. Okay. So when we're looking at poetry, you want to do the introduction. So I just got a quick introduction. So basically, poetry is a distinct literary medium that prioritizes, so they take out the thoughts, sensory impact, and the structures of linear storytelling. So linear storytelling is like novels. Like you see the book of Tsotsi, you see the book of Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, how they will tell stories. They tell in paragraphs. They tell it in one story, right? In order to get to a thought of something, a novel, an author, right, will take 5 pages, 10 pages. In order to get to the point of Tsotsi, the fact that he's actually a broken person, it took you like 11 chapters, right? In order to get to Macbeth, the Crucible, to find out that, what's her name? Abigail is actually a nasty person. It took about like several chapters in, right? But with poetry, the nice thing is it will only take you 3 lines. 3 lines in, you get the idea of what the author is trying to say. So when we're going to talk about poetry, you find there are different things. Novels, dramas, you have paragraphs, right? But when you come to poetry, what we have? Instead of calling it paragraphs, what we call them? Stanzas, right? Instead of calling the author of our poem the author, we call them the what?
The writer.
No.
Speaker.
No. What
Poet.
we call it? The poet. Right? We call them the poet. So, also one of the things about poetry, you can go. Also one of the things about poetry, right? We have within the paragraph, right? We have sentences. We don't call them sentences in poets, we call them lines. Okay, but you see, with the reason why they call it a structure literature, right, is because when we have our novels, you need to have capital letters. You need to have your punctuation marks. For example, you can't just write. You need to have. It's very important. Otherwise, they take it off and say, no, you're illiterate. You don't know how to write books. Quite as an author.
So maybe like a poet that I did, ma'am, with ma'am the master book, they didn't have capital letters, no punctuation.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
So what's that one called?
No, I'll get into it. So, but that's a perfect example, right? In poems, most poems you realize they don't even have capital letters. Some of them, they will start with ellipses. Some will start with a full stop. It doesn't matter. The poet, it's called a literally the creative freedom to do whatever you want in a poem, because with poems you need short lines within few lines to create a picture. So that's what we know about poetry so far, right? So here they ask us why. So in your poetry books you have different types of poetry books. You have different types of poems, right? We have sonnets, we have epitaphs, we have proses, so on and so forth, right? And we have the simple thing like Mary Had a Little Lamb. Most of the time poems can be written into songs. Even songwriting can be considered poetry as well. So with these poems, what do you think, what is, besides making a statement of love, right? William Shakespeare, if you look at the Sonnet 130, who's doing Sonnet 130? You're not doing Sonnet 130. Or are you doing it? For William Shakespeare. Okay, so William Shakespeare, there's a poem called Sonnet 130, and he's talking about this woman, right? And typically, when someone talks about the woman they love, they would say she has rosy cheeks, right? She has beautiful blue eyes, she has long, wavy hair, her skin is like this, her face is like this, right? But in William Shakespeare, he took the opportunity to say she's wiry, she's loud, her voice is annoying, her voice is grating, but he's the only one that would ever love her like that, right? That's a way one person can express his love. It's very creative, right? Another person can like look at the Doomed Youth. Who's doing the Doomed Youth? None of you guys. In the Doomed Youth, the poet, right? They're talking about June 16, I think, right? And now this is a political poem. So poems are just like novels. The same way you can use a novel to write about love, about war, about any topic in the world, poems use it the exact same way. So now we have the introduction to what poetry is and what to expect from poems, right? Now we're going to look at how are we going to do the analysis of a poem, because now that we come into creating, the analysis is very important because you guys are doing something called poetic essays, am I right? So if you don't understand how to analyze a poem, you cannot do an essay. The thing with a poetic essay, poetry essay is similar to the literature essay, but we'll get into that a bit later on. So now we're going to look at the analysis. Right, so now we have the foundations. This is topic 1, right? This is everything we are going to look at when we are looking at poetry. When we look at message, motive, title, poet, background, some of the times they won't have everything, but you need to know everything. Do you understand? When I'm talking about title, I'm talking about the heading of the poem. The same thing when you open a book, The Crucible, which is the title of the poem, you'll get the title that we are doing today is London 1802. Right? You got it there in your book, right? Now we have the poet, which I said, whereas the novels, you have authors. This is the person who is writing the poem, okay? Then we have the background. Now this is most of the time, it's very important, especially because you guys are grade 12s, the GFET sector, right? When they talk about the background, sometimes, not all the time, but in cases when you're doing a literature essay, they will use how does the background of the poem, of the poet influences the poem. So now if you have someone like, I'll give an example here. Let me just pick it here quickly. There you go. Now we have an example of someone like Williams Wordsworth, right, and we have John Milton. These are the two poets you guys might come across in when you look at your books. Now, we have John Milton. He was a romantic poet. Romantic means at the time he was doing things of religious values and the virtues during the Civil War, right? And he was born during the 17th century. Now, the century also when a person is born is also very important. Do you guys know Maya Angelou? You guys don't know Maya Angelou? Yay! Now, Maya Angelou, she is a freedom fighter in America, right? So she was during that century with Martin Luther King and all those people, right, fighting for the freedom of against segregation, all those stuff that we know what happened in America, right? So the time that she was born in, the era that she was born in, and the poems that she wrote was dedicated to her era, right? Her era was freeing the black people, getting equal opportunities, fighting for women's rights, all that kind of stuff, right? Now they would ask, for example, in her case, they would ask, how does her background influence her poems? And you find it's because she's an activist, right? In this case, John Milton, he was born in the 17th century, around the time of the Civil War. And that is important when we look at certain poems that he writes. It has an influence on his poems, to understand. So now we understand background can be very important when it comes to who the poet is, right? Now we have the speaker. Now the speaker, it's not the poet. The speaker is a person speaking in the poem. Do you understand that? When we are reading a novel, have you guys heard of the first narrator,
Yes.
second narrator, and third narrator? What is the first narrator?
The poet.
In
Us.
novels, in stories. Who's the first narrator? Who are you referring to? Betsy? Do you know?
Ma'am, can you repeat the question?
When we are talking about the first narrator, who are we referring to?
The person who tells this, like the story.
Yes. I'm
Yes,
telling
the
it through my eyes. If we're reading a story, it's through my eyes. When we read the introduction to the Crucible, for example, yeah, now as a quick, I'm going to do a quick excerpt from the Crucible. At the time of these events, Paris was in his middle 40s. In history, he cuts a villainous path, and there is very little good to be said for him. He believed he was being persecuted wherever he went, despite his best efforts to win people and God to his side. In meetings, he felt insulted if someone rose to shut the door without asking his permission first. Now, when we are talking about the first narrator and the third narrator, right, I think there's the second narrator, but I'm not doing this. Third narrator, it's the eyes above, the person who's looking above, who's watching the scenario. I'm watching the scenario, right? As someone who's telling the story, I can say Arafat is looking at me, Betty is looking at me, we're busy looking at the board, one person is taking the video. I'm the narrator, I can observe everything, right? But the first narrator would be Arafat telling the story, saying, I'm sitting in my chair, watching Madam Aksha talking a lot, I'm kind of tired of this class, whatever. That is his thoughts, him speaking. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. Right? But when we're coming to speaker, it's the exact same concept. The poet is writing the story, yes, but the speaker is the one experiencing it. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's the person going through the situation. In this case, for example, when we look at the poem London 1802, right? In this poem, the author, the poet is speaking, right? He's saying, Milton, thou shouldest be living at this hour. England hath need of thee. She is a fen of stagnant waters, altar, sword, and pen. Now we're going to go into that analysis to understand. But with this text, the person who is writing it, it's what's his name again? It is, what is this man's name? I forgot this man's name. I think it's Lord Milton. John Milton is writing this poem, but he's speaking in the third person. He's not talking, because how do we understand who's writing it? Is the nouns that they're using. You guys know what nouns are, right? Personal pronouns. You guys know what those are.
Yeah. Hey,
what are they?
Personal pronouns. Who?
The
dog.
What's a personal pronoun?
I.
Thank you. And?
You.
And? I want to come. Thank you. That's how you determine who is speaking. Do you understand? If they're using names, that means someone else is talking. But you say, I'm going through it, and as we read on, with all of these analysis, we start to figure out who actually is the speaker. Now we come to theme. Theme is, what is the story about? I think I have it here. What is the story about? Is it love? Is it religion? Is it morality? All those kind of stuff. That is theme of the poem. Okay, and in love, you can talk about many stuff. Do you understand? But theme is, what is the actual thing that's happening? What exactly are we talking about here? Then we have diction. Diction is words. What words are they using? What specific words is being used in this poem to say the author or the speaker is angry? The author is disgusted. She's happy. She's feeling nostalgia. What diction, what words is she using to show the specific emotion that she's feeling? Okay. Then we have tone. Tone is, how does she sound? So diction, it says, so she uses, I'm disgusted. The word disgusted shows, okay, she's upset, because, or many other things, right? But the tone is, how is she sounding throughout? How exactly is she carrying this message throughout?
So remember, diction is like word lines. No,
diction is a word. It's the words being used. For example, in this poem, right, they are talking about pen, and sword, and all these certain words, right? That's diction. The words is like dictionary. Words you'll find in a dictionary, right? But if I'm asking you the tone, I'm saying, what era is this? The 17th century. Why do we know that? Where in this century do we use words, she is a fen? We don't use that. Do you understand what I'm saying? What does fen mean? We don't know. That's not in our vocab. The same way, if we were to write a poem and you were to say riz, for example, we would understand it because in our century we use words like riz. Okay, there's other words we use as well. Or capping, that's an old word, flex, whatever, right? We understand it because it's our words to use. But if someone from the 18th century would read it, what does that mean? What do you understand what I'm saying? That's diction, the words being used. But the way they use those words is how we determine tone. Do you understand? Now we have literary devices. That is things like similes, personification, onomatopoeia. What is onomatopoeia?
Sound.
What is personification, Betsy? Thank you, Betsy. What's personification?
I was waving to the wave.
Betsy? What is personification? Do you remember? What is it?
Mem, for example, can I give an example?
Yeah, give an example.
If I said, Ish, this pen is hairy. So I'm giving like an object, a person's
Characteristics,
yeah, yes.
exactly. That is literally devices. Alright? It's how do they use simile, how do they use metaphor to create a situation, a scenario, or to carry on the theme, the tone, so on and so forth. Okay. Then we have structure. That is like the rhyming schemes. In a sonnet, we're going to do another sonnet because London 1802 is a sonnet. We're going to learn about the octet, the sestets, the octet, the pentachron, all that kind of stuff, right? That is the structure. How do they structure the poem? Some poems they use 3 lines in 1 line, and then you find out, oh, there's actually a pattern being created by 3 lines, 4 lines, 3 words, 4 words, 5 words, 3 words. Do you understand what I'm saying? Right? And then we have the rhyming scheme, the A, B, C, D, C, D, A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. Do you understand? So that is the structure. Imagery. What image are we creating? What are you, all these things that are being created, what are you getting from it? Is the atmosphere moody? Right? Is she creating a morning sun coming peeking through the rainy clouds, or do you understand what I'm saying? What mood, what image are you getting from all these things being created? Right? Then we have the message. Something here which explained it nicely for me. Oh, yeah. Then we have message. Message is obviously she's saying, I'm against violence against women. I'm against politicians being greedy and our poor people suffering. Right? That's the message that the person is trying to tell us. Right? Or I am for this, I'm for that. That's what they're trying to tell us through all the words being said. Or I love women like that. That's the message. Right? Then we have motive. So they say a motive, it's a concrete, recurring element, image, phrase, or physical object throughout the poem. So for example, a locked door, a withered rose, the ticking of a clock. That's the motive. So something that reoccurs all the time. So what do we see all the time? What are they always mentioning? That's the motive. Okay. And I think that's all for the foundation. You can pause.